Welcome everyone to Insights with Dr. Val-Addo. My name is Dr. J. Val-Addo, and this is our third presentation in the series of Insights with Dr. Val-Addo. The previous ones were ideas behind the name Africa and also science on the wall for Africans and their leaders. And we want to thank you so much if you've been watching this series. And I believe that if you have been sending us some comment, it's been very helpful to us and to other viewers and other readers. So we want to appreciate it. We want to encourage you to continue watching this series on Insights with Dr. Val-Addo, especially as we deal with African issues. Now, until we announce another topic or a new topic, we'll be focusing on hindsight, scriptural, philosophical factor in history undermining Africa's development. Now, in this particular presentation, we're going to talk about a key to understanding what happened to Africa. Now, there are so many things that have happened to Africa and Africans, and we want to provide a key so that in our next presentation or subsequent presentations, we will be able to understand the context in which we are trying to discuss issues. Now, Solomon, the wisest king in ancient Israel and then the then known world, stated something in Proverbs chapter 4 verse 7, the last part. It says, in all you're getting, get understanding. That means whatever you get in this life, the most important thing to have is to have understanding, because understanding guides us in many ways. You may understand things and not agree, but you need to understand it anyway. Or you may understand things in order to agree to certain things. Now, to understand is to have the ability to comprehend the reason for what may be under the stand. So we call it understand. That means under the stand. For example, what is under the stand of a table? That makes it stand, or a chair. And what sustains it? It's the simple definition of understanding. Now, when we talk about comprehension, it is very important to capture or gain understanding. That means you are able to comprehend, you are able to capture, you are able to understand things as it were when it was happening or when it happened. So, hindsight is one of the means to gain comprehension, to gain or capture understanding. And so we are going to introduce ourselves into hindsight to know whether whatever hindsight that we develop is reliable, trustworthy, or dependable. Now let us define in hindsight. Hindsight is the understanding of a situation or an event only after it has happened or in course of its development. That is what hindsight means. When events or situations happen, we call it hindsight, and you want to understand it, we call it hindsight. Or when situations or events are unfolding, and you are trying to understand it, we call it hindsight. Now, hindsight is very important because it helps us to understand things better that has taken place or are taking place because of the definition that we have given. Now, there are ways situations or events may happen or develop, and we need to capture that understanding. Sometimes, number one, it comes from at least three sources. People have premeditated setups. They set up things, they premeditate or plan for things. We can have an understanding from the way they did it. Number two, hindsight also comes from a phenomenon that took place or is taking place. That is when something is taking place instantly or suddenly, or it took place many years ago instantly or suddenly. It may be repeating itself now in the present, or it may not be repeating itself. We need to understand that. It may be what is going on in a country, about its politics, about its economy, about everything. Then we will be able to develop understanding of what happened or what is happening. Number three is we gain hindsight or understanding from divine orchestration. What we mean by that is when the Creator divinely allows or orders certain situations or events to take place or to develop in accordance with his exclusive wisdom, then that too, we can have hindsight from it. Now, we human beings can gain understanding in each of these situations. Now, there are at least four kinds of hindsight that we can develop understanding from concerning an event or a situation. One is intellectual hindsight. Number two is what I call instant, unlearned, intuitive hindsight. Number three is scriptural, divine, or theological hindsight. And number four is historical hindsight. And I will take time to explain these terms, break it down for all of us to understand, so we can understand how we can look at hindsight from these four areas. Now, the key to understanding hindsight is reflection. Now, reflection is considering, or when you take time to consider, you take time to think, or you take time to mirror back, look back, think back, consider back an event or a situation deeply for a long time. So you spend time on events and on situations so you can develop hindsight, you can understand it better, how it took place. So it is not just, rushing and just overlooking things, but it takes a lot of time. Let's talk about intellectual hindsight as the first kind of hindsight. It's when people develop intellectual penetration. That means they penetrate into the deeper side of the intellect. Why people premeditated to set up certain things, to structure certain things, to think and to plan certain things. Things don't just happen. Things take place because it develops in people's mind. And we need to have a hindsight on how they thought about it, how they planned it, how they structured it, how they set it up. And that is what we call intelligence. And for those of us in the Western world, we have the Central Intelligence Agency. They are using the intelligence, the brain, the mind that the Creator has given to us. Now, this comes from several years of the development of the intellect. You develop it through the academics, and then you learn to put it into practice. This requires research. It requires research, reflection, investigations, interviews, and interrogations. So that is where you can know and understand actually what took place or what is taking place. Now, this form of hindsight may be correct most of the time, but it is also susceptible to mistakes sometimes because it's the human brain, human mind. It depends on the purity of the person's mind or the purity of the person's internal being that will make it more reliable. Now, let us go on to the instant, unlearned, intuitive hindsight, the number 2 type or kind of hindsight. It comes from a phenomena or events that happen suddenly. Though it may be sudden, we may have instant perception or reception of thoughts or feelings that goes through us about the event that is taking place. And most religious people will describe it as intuition. Others will call it the manifestation of word of knowledge or discernment or discerning of spirit. Now, this is susceptible to mistakes depending on the depth of an individual's inner virtue or lack of it. Now, it may deceive you to think the other way, which may not be the understanding of the event or the situation. For example, if somebody is gripped by suspicion, he is always suspicious for a long time, that person's inner being is contaminated. It is soiled, and every hindsight that will come out of it will be contaminated. So we cannot trust that kind of hindsight that has to do with instant, unlearned, intuitive hindsight. Now let's go to the scriptural, divine, or theological hindsight. This is a hindsight about events or situations ordered by the Creator. Sometimes it's written in the good book, or it may be ongoing, and it requires a bit of the specialization of people who know deeply the Creator and how He relates to particular situations, to events, and to issues that may be taking place or happening from divine revelation. Now, when we say divine revelation, we are talking about the self-disclosure of the Creator. The Creator discloses Himself. Nobody has seen Him, but He discloses Himself to people of virtue and divine spirituality. And most of the time, they are documented in the good book, and they sometimes come to us through nature. Now, we are saying all this because virtue is very important. It is having or showing high moral standards. Divine spirituality is a life informed, infused, and influenced by divine spirit of the Creator, not any other spirit, but the spirit of the Creator. A dedicated and vigorous study of scripture, divinity, or theology exposes people to the hindsight of divine revelation. They begin to understand how the Creator is revealing things and exposing things, either through what had happened or through an occurrence or a divine phenomena. This requires intellectual penetration also through study, reflection, and virtuous intuition. I hope we understand this because it's a little bit technical, but I'm trying to explain it. Now, there is also the historical hindsight. When events or situations become history and they are either documented or not, but they are spoken, we call it oral history or written history, we can develop understanding from it, from what might have happened in the past to guide us. So hindsight through history also requires intellectual penetration from thinking, reflection, and careful analysis of the historical narratives. Now, when we understand hindsight, hindsight usually develops into insights. And insight is the capacity to gain accurate and deep intuitive understanding of a situation, of a thing, of a person. There at that moment. Now, if you have hindsight of the person, if you have the hindsight of the issue, if you have the hindsight of similar events, you will be able to develop insight. That is, internally, you will be able to capture and internalize what is going on. So, it is very important. I'm saying this because as we talk about Africa and we discuss about African issues, we need to have the hindsight, the understanding of what had happened in history, which is true, and know the hindsight of issues that may be happening at the moment. That will help us to have insight, internalize what is going on, so we can be cautious or we can run with it. Now, hindsight, insight, and foresight interplay for the development of a successful individual or corporate life. That means if your family life, if your individual life, if the life of your country and the life of Africa is going to be prosperous, be advancing, we need to understand hindsight. How we look at it, how we develop insight, and how we can develop foresight. They interplay. They work together. They are linked to one another. Now, when we get insight, we easily also get hindsight and foresight. When we know what is happening now, it is because we have had hindsight. And then we can also know what is happening now and check the hindsight of it. So we can also develop the foresight. What is foresight? It is the ability to determine and shape the future. We cannot have foresight and shape the future of the continent of Africa or our country or any family if we do not understand the hindsight of issues and events and situations that are taking place and looking at it critically in the present to develop insight. So to have insight and foresight for the development of Africa and its peoples, Africans need to capture the hindsight of things that took place in the life of the continent and its peoples. This may enable them determine whether what they capture and understand continue to contribute to undermine it, or it will help to foster its advancement. Now, our purpose is to lay a foundation for our next presentation. And I hope you are not going to miss it. Because in our next presentation, we are going to apply what we have studied about hindsight, about things that has taken place, our understanding of it, the historical hindsight, the scriptural, theological, divine hindsight, and also the intellectual hindsight. That is the penetration that we have into issues intellectually. Because of our inner purity or virtue, we will be able to understand this. And this is what we are going to do. So this is just to lay the foundation for us to understand that nothing works by accident. There are understanding to issues as they happen or they happened, and we will develop insight so that it will help us to develop foresight for our lives, for our countries, for the continent of Africa, so that things will not just overtake us. We at Insights with Dr. Val-Addo believe that this information has been a blessing to you, and we believe that you will continue to subscribe to this channel or this presentation by just clicking the subscribe button for you to get the next presentation, so we can factor things in the context of today's presentation. And if the information has been a blessing to you, we want you to press the thumb up and the share symbol and send it to friends and relatives. And in addition, do not forget to leave a comment if you have any. I'm looking forward to meeting with you on this channel for our next presentation that will put all this hindsight understanding and insight and foresight projection for the continent of Africa and its people in its context. God bless.